From Cornwall to Birmingham and Johnston and Bexhill, here's Ruben Spire on the radio.
Hello to Michelle Laverick Music. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm really pleased to be here.
Thank you for chatting to you today. So, can you tell me how long have you been a singer-songwriter for?
That's a really interesting question because I have been playing guitar since I was 16. That's nearly more than 30 odd years. But I only really started seriously writing my own songs about 2 years ago. And I used to joke with people, my output previously was like one song every 5 or every 10 years. So I used to say, when I'm 80, I'll have the double gatefold sleeve album ready just before I die. But about 2 years ago, I wrote a song and I was like, oh, well, here's my once a decade song. And a couple of weeks later, another song came. And I thought, that's strange. There's usually like a good 10-year or 5-year gap between one song and another. And I didn't really think that much about it. And then another song came and I thought, this is really weird. And my brother kind of dared me to go out and do an EP. And a friend of mine locally, David, had said, you should record some of your stuff. And he was thinking mainly covers, to be honest with you. And I said to him, well, I've just started writing songs of my own. How about we do an EP? And as we were recording the EP, more songs came. And I said to David, let's do an album. Who knows how long this will last for? Might as well just do an album. So it was very much a kind of, I call it the accidental album, because it wasn't really planned as an album. It just came spinning out. And then when the album was done, more songs kept on coming. And so that has happened for the last 2 years. I think I've got to the point where I kind of trust if I don't write a song every week or every month, something will come. But right now, I haven't written a song since June. So I'm like, oh, I haven't written a song for a while. Oh, is that the last one? So it's quite, despite my age and how long I've been playing for, the whole writing my own stuff is actually very, very new. So I'm a young, don't laugh, emerging artist. I've only been in the biz 2 years. Just don't tell anybody about the previous 30 odd years that came before. And I did write songs when I was a teenager, wrote a lot of poetry when I was young, but it never seemed to take off as something I did in the way I'm doing it now. So for a very long time and for a very short period of time is the answer to your question. You'll find out that I can't be brief. I'm really sorry.
So, can you tell me, did you go into this recording studio or did you record your first album, your debut album?
I've done it in two different ways. With the first album, it was recorded around a friend's house, Mel's house, his girlfriend's house that she was renting in a village not far from here. And I would go once a week and we'd record a song in her spare bedroom. Dave would be down the corridor with a laptop. I would be in the spare bedroom with microphones everywhere. And it was very much just me and the guitar with no real other instruments. This time around, I went to a professional studio, to Hayes Studio. Ben Haynes was the producer of the EP. And I was definitely looking to do something different this time, which was there's still me and a guitar and a shruti box or a harmonium. But I said to Ben, who's a multi-instrumentalist in his own right, he's a very talented man, I want bass in here and I want strings and piano and electric guitar and stuff like that. And because he's so talented as a musician, I would record the bass, guitar and vocals and maybe the harmonium, and we'd sit and listen to it and he would just sit there and play a bit of bass. And I'd be like, oh, so the EP has more of a kind of band sound rather than just me being Daryl and guitar. So the album was recorded for free. Dave did that work for nothing, which was I'm extremely grateful for. I don't think I'd be doing the EP if he hadn't helped me do the first album. Um, and then yeah, so and then obviously going into a studio, these things all cost money. So I had to finance that myself. I actually bought a camper van this year, but I had to sell my car because I can't run two vehicles. And I sold the car, and rather than putting it against the camper van, I used the money from selling the car to do the EP, which was a bit naughty of me, but it made it so it didn't feel like it was coming directly out of my bank account. That's how I got the EP done.
So, was it like going to the recording studio?
It's very, very relaxed. Um, Ben has one of these very large home offices in his back garden, which is instead of being a home office, he's kitted out as a studio. It's got sofas in it and it's very kind of relaxed. So it's not like going into a studio where there's a big glass booth with a red light up and the studio engineer goes, go! And you go, ugh. It's much more kind of relaxed thing. Um, Very much like working with Dave, but with Dave, he obviously has his own day job, whereas all that Ben does is music production and his own music. So he's a professional. Not to say that Dave isn't good, but he's professional. He's making his living out of music, and he was a great. I already knew Bex, a lady girl I know who is a Scottish singer who lives locally. And while we were sat in the studio, he would play me some of Beck's tracks. So, this is what Bex was doing this morning. And I heard some of the strings on Bex's album, and I was like, wow, these strings are amazing. And that's how I got introduced to Jazz Scott, who's the celloist on one of the tracks on the EP. And I always knew that the track Selkie Child, which is the name of the EP, had enough space in it that it could have other instruments on it. It wouldn't crowd out. So I said, let's get Jazz to do some cello on this and see what she comes up with. Anyway, she brought back to us a track that had 36 components to it, where she played the cello 36 times, building layer upon layer until she sounds like a string quartet or sounds like an orchestra. And when I heard that, it just blew me away to the point it was like, let's turn down the guitars. What Jazz is doing is just phenomenal. So I think the difference with going to a professional recording studio is other musicians are going there and you get to know them and you get introduced to the people they're collaborating with, which then pulls things into your music that potentially wouldn't do. So while Ben was adding like bass and guitar and all this other stuff, Jazz was like the kind of striker that we brought in to score a goal in the last minute of time, and she really did phenomenal work on the EP. So it's actually what Ben and Jazz has contributed that makes me really proud of the EP, because they've taken my little songs with the guitar and the harmonium or the Shruti box and then added 10 or 20 or 30% to them. I was like, wow, So yeah, it's a very different experience to being in your mate's spare bedroom around his girlfriend's house.
So, can you tell me more about your debut album called Songs from a Cold Conservatory?
Yeah, that's the title for that comes from the fact in my house I have one of those UPVC conservatories, and a lot of my music gear, mainly amplifiers and effects units and stuff like that, used to sit in the conservatory. And obviously during spring and summer, it's okay in there. But as autumn and winter comes in, it gets colder and colder in the cold conservatory. And so some of the songs were written and kind of worked out while I was in the conservatory. And I thought, what am I going to call this? And I thought, songs from a cold conservatory has got to kind of snappiness to it. And I did have an idea of doing another album, which would be songs from a warm living room, because all the gear that was in the conservatory is being moved into the living room. I had a period of ill health over the last 2 years, but I was well enough to play music at home. But I didn't want to be in the conservatory in the middle of December. So the lounge, which is not huge, is just filling up with amplifiers and guitars. I can barely move in my own living room. But at least it's warm enough to be in there and play rather than freezing to death in the cold conservatory.
So continue moving on to your new EP called Selkie Child. So can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, sure. It's usually an EP is a collection of very disparate songs that are not related to each other. But the Selkie Child EP is like a small suite of songs that are quite closely intertwined with each other, with themes about leaving home and returning to home. There's lots of symbolism around the sea in the EP. So it's intended to be listened to as a kind of whole, and it even has a little hidden reprise at the end that brings back some of the music in the first track at the end, sort of close it out. But to speak of Selkie Child, the actual track itself that opens up the EP, not everybody might know about what a Selkie is. A Selkie is a creature from Scots Irish myth, which is essentially a seal or a seal-like creature that comes out of the sea, takes off their skin, and underneath there is a human woman inside this creature. And she will often meet a guy. Sometimes they will have children. And the tension in that story is always about the children, and the father don't want her to go back to the sea because they love her too much and don't want to lose her. But she feels this calling to the sea because that's where she's come from. And there's lots and lots of different variations in this story. Sometimes they hide her skin, so she can't get back into her seal skin and go out for a swim. Sometimes she finds her skin and she goes away but doesn't come back. And there's lots of different motifs like that. And quite a popular story in a lot of folk songs. So there's two people I know who've written folk songs or performed folk songs around this. The Young Thanks did a song about the Selkie, and so does a musician who I really love and very influenced by, is a lady called Lucy Farrell. So my joke is that I'm on a 100-step program to becoming a folk musician. And step 3, you have to write a song about a Selkie. So what drew me into the story was thinking about the children of this relationship are half human, half Selkie. And I was quite interested in that duality where they have inside them two different components, if you like. They're kind of blended, where it's the Selkie is a Selkie, her husband is a human male. Therefore, the Selkie child must be some sort of fusion of these two different worlds, which sounds quite pretentious and conscious of, but it's sort of like a big sort of metaphor, really, to some degree. Yeah, so that's where the title of Selkie Child comes from and what made me think of that particular song.
So continue. I know you got some EP launch coming soon. So can you tell me more about them dates?
Yeah, I've got gigs coming up through October, November, and December, and into January. The big news is I'm supporting a guy called Martin Stevenson and the Dainties. I've followed Martin since I was a teenager. He was kind of a cult musician amongst students in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. And that comes off the back of this year supporting Tom Robinson, who I'm sure lots of your listeners will know from the late 70s, 246 Motorway and all those sorts of tracks, Sing If You're Glad to Be Gay. And so it's something I'm really keen to do more support work, as well as doing my own sort of solo stuff. It's a great way of sort of bringing my music to more people. But as we were saying offline, it's a great way of sort of honing your craft. So I'm playing, supporting Martin Stevenson at Band on the Wall on the 6th of October, which is a week on Sunday, recording this as the weekend is coming up. And then I'm supporting him again in December, which I think is the 2nd or the 7th of December in Sheffield at the Samuel Worth Chapel. And then I've got gigs of my own. I've got an EP launch in my hometown of Wirksworth in Derbyshire in November. I've also got a gig in Sheffield again at the Never Edge Bowling Club, which is a very, very popular venue, just across the road from Cafe 9, if you know Sheffield at all. Two great music venues, or, like really lovely, intimate venues where you get 50, 60, 100 people very closely together, and it's really close, as opposed to being in some massive stadium where the artist is miles away and you get a set of goggles and you look at TV soon. You're really up close and personal with the performer. And then my first gig in the new year is in Belper, which is also in Derbyshire, across the way from where I live. It's about 40 minutes away. And I'll be doing a 40-minute set there along with some other musicians as well. So I'm trying to get out and about. I'd love to do a gig a week, or at the moment it's like 2 gigs a month or a gig a month. So I'm not massively touring around the UK, but if anybody wants me to come and perform, as I was saying to you when we were chatting offline, I've got a camper van. I can go anywhere in the UK to perform, and I can crash in the camper van overnight and then toddle home the next day after the gig.
So finally, can you tell me, listeners, where can they find you on your social media?
Right, okay. I'm on everything. Probably the easiest thing to do is just Google my name, Michelle Laverick. People seem to struggle with my surname. And the way I always say to people is think of the word maverick, but it starts with an L. Yeah, Laverick. I used to be quite big on Twitter. I had a big following there. I still have an account on Twitter, but the way things have gone recently, I have decided it's time for me to walk away. But, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Mastodon, I'm on all the socials, and YouTube as well. One of the things I do like to do between recordings is if I'm working on songs, I will do demos for free that I will stick on to my YouTube channel and paste everywhere across the socials. So I do put a lot of music out that is for free and isn't in a recording studio. It's just me here in my office cum studio. And that's often a good sneak peek of what's coming. So if you want to hear what the EP is that I'm working on next year, if you troll through my YouTube channel, you'll see some tracks that aren't on the album, aren't on the EP, and they're the ones that are likely to get the studio treatment. And I think I'll probably keep those things on as a kind of record of how the songs evolved over time. And some people prefer a solo acoustic vocalist on its own, and some people like the studio sound. So it's nice to have both. And it's kind of a bit more intimate because it's not a record, it's just me in my space here.
Thank you. Let me chat to you today.
It's been great chatting to you. Thank you for the opportunity to get my music out and get more people hearing my new EP. Thank you very much for that time.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.